Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. My co-host, Kayla Beatty, will be joining me here shortly. And once again, we are live here on MMA World. And thank you again to everybody that is tuning in this week for another edition of the show. Last week on the show, of course, we covered Bellator 191 and recap UFC Winnipeg. On this week's show, we are going to be all in on UFC 219. We're going to preview the complete main card, give our picks for the main card as well at the end of the show, and of course highlight some of the undercard for the last UFC show of 2017. We're also going to talk about any major headlines that have happened in the world of combat sports as well. So, without further ado, to join me and get Beyond the Cage rolling live here on MMA World is my co-host who will be joining me right now. Once again, I am your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And this is my co-host, Kayla Beatty. And how's it going today, Kayla?
Hey, Jim. How are you? Hey, guys.
I am doing pretty well. How was your Christmas?
It was great. I spent some really nice family time. We made homemade tamales and danced and opened presents. It was really nice. How was yours?
Pretty good. I was able to get most of the things on my list that I had this year for Christmas, and I thought I gave some pretty cool gifts as well. One of the coolest things I got was, well, it's from a gift card, but still cool. I was able to get it because of the gift card. Those Amazon gift cards are really great. I got the vinyl record edition of the Awesome Mix Volume 1 from Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, because I just started getting into vinyl records and everything. So I was able to get that on Amazon, and even has a picture of Star-Lord's face on the record itself, too. It's like a big kind of like...
Oh, that's nice.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's something you'll be able to keep for a while.
Yeah, so obviously that has some great songs on it, but that was probably one of the cooler things I got.
Did you get your jacket, your sweater that you're wearing? Because that looks very festive.
Yeah, yes, I did actually. That's not specifically why I'm wearing it today, but I don't know if you've been paying attention to the weather. Over here in Michigan, we've had some very cold temperatures, and in fact, I think it's like something like 8 degrees outside, and I think last night it went down to 0. My car was like almost frozen just trying to get lunch this morning.
Oh, no.
So even inside the house with heat on, you still got to wear, like, I call it like a house jacket. I don't know if that's like it's probably not, I don't know if I can't say I like completely coined that term, but that's what I like to call it. So this is a nice house jacket. It even has we can't see the pocket, but it has pockets. And it's very nice to wear on days like this.
Well, it looks nice.
Yeah. You probably don't have to worry about house jackets as much in California. Not as much.
It's a little chilly over here. Yeah, I'm wearing a long sweater.
Yeah, it's chilly at what, like 60 degrees?
Yeah, around there.
All right. As I was telling everybody, of course, we have UFC 219 this weekend out in Las Vegas, the last real big show of the year. I know there's Risen too, so calm down, people. I know Risen's happening, but come on. The UFC end of the year show is usually one of the biggest shows of the year. This year, maybe not quite as big as previous years. I think they had wanted to make it a really big event, similar to what happened at 217. But for whatever reason, it really didn't materialize. And I'm not saying the main event isn't good, but typically they really like to stack that event, and somehow it, I hate to say fall through, because there's still a lot of good fights. But do you feel that this isn't as big as it has been even in years past, Kayla, the New Year's Eve card for this year?
Yeah, kind of leading up to it, I do a radio show with my friend Gabriel Gonzalez on MMA Daily, and we were saying it's going to be really hard for them to put together this big card that, like you're saying, they usually stack up. And I think it had to do with a few of the divisions kind of being held up, whether it be Stipe trying to figure out his contract, or Conor trying to figure out when he's going to come back and who he's going to fight against. So I think that we're really seeing how that kind of stuff played into this last card and how they were trying to build it up. But luckily, in January, we're going to get at least Stipe's return.
Yeah, and thanks for the comments, Ray. I see you commenting there. And yeah, it's probably cold in Illinois as well. And yeah, I am excited for this weekend's event. So like I said, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, this event stinks or something like that. But what I'm saying is historically, the New Year's Eve card, you can almost kind of put money in the bank that it's going to be the best card of the year or one of. And this year, it's more of just, I mean, I guess you could say an average pay-per-view card. I think that's fair. It's just not as big as it typically has been. That's all.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got a comment from Ryan. Oh, Ryan, thanks for filling in last week too. Losing John Lineker sucks. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks, but it's not like John Lineker was going to help this sell more pay-per-views. You know, I think the people that were going to buy this event are still buying regardless of John Lineker. It's only people like us doing shows and covering it and really are hardcore about the sport that are like, oh man, we're going to see John Lineker against Jimmy Rivera. We're the only ones who really care about the grand scheme of things. It's not. I don't think it's going to affect the card. You can't use that as the UFC can't use that as an excuse to be like, well, it only sold 300 buys because we didn't have John Lineker. No one ever will say that.
Yeah. I think everyone was really rooting for Jimmy Rivera to get some opponent after he had lost, Dominic Cruz and then John Lineker and all of that drama. But I was saying yesterday, I think that actually might be a blessing in disguise for him. After we saw Ricardo Lamas and Josh Emmett, sometimes taking these fights when you're that close to a possible title shot, or at least in talk, something wrong could happen where you get knocked out and then all of a sudden you're not in that mix anymore. So I'm wondering if that's kind of a blessing in disguise, even though I do feel bad that Jimmy had to go through all of the drama of trying to figure out who his opponent was over the holidays.
Right, and there was a situation, this is one of the headlines I wanted to talk about before we got in, was there was a situation where Marlon Moraes was trying to actually fight Jimmy Rivera. Initially, I think they were going to set it at like a 138-pound catch weight or something like that, and Marlon Moraes is like, I can't make that in this amount of notice. And then Rivera was like, oh, how about 140? And then he was like, I can't even do that. What about 145? And I think it just got too much back and forth that the UFC's like, all right, we can't just keep moving it up. It's just not going to happen. It's just not.
Yeah, and you're taking a risk on a big stage of the end of the year card too. So I know I personally would want to. I mean, yes, it's all about taking those fights and taking those risks and chances because who knows what could happen, and then all of a sudden you're built to this stardom. But it's also taking that risk that you're on this main stage, and if you're not prepared and not at a weight that you're comfortable with, something bad could happen that could jeopardize you moving up through the rankings and title shots. So it's tricky.
Yeah, we got a question or comment from Peter. Habib is still yet to pull out yet, and yes, he has yet to pull out yet. So we still
I feel nervous.
We still got one day for that to happen, Peter, before he's rushed to the hospital again for not making weight. So we can keep our fingers crossed on. No, I'm kidding.
It's so terrible. We're all on the edge of our seats.
No, but I saw a report, Kayla, that something he was rushed to the hospital last week in the process of trying to get his body down to 155 again, and I'm not sure if he can make 155 for this fight. Great, but I'm thinking long term, especially for a guy that has had a series of injury problems before. I'm not sure how much longer he can fight at this weight class. It doesn't seem to be something that he can do in a timely fashion, and it doesn't seem to be something that he can do in a healthy fashion. And so even if he makes the weight, even if he beats Barboza, I think that's something that him, his management team, his whole Dagestan posse or whatever he has rocking out there in San Jose, they got to really look at themselves and say, is this right for me? And I'm not sure if it is. It doesn't seem like he can just do this weight class anymore. And I don't know if that's just he has too much muscle, the injury. I don't know what the combination of factors are, but it doesn't seem like he can do this at a very good level or a very good return rate as you will anymore. It just doesn't seem like that.
Yeah, I think his health should be the number one concern, and especially if he says that he has plans of being champion and defending that title. There's a lot of people now that have been waiting to fight and go after that. So I think if he has plans of being a champion, he really has to make sure that, like you said, I think in the beginning people were questioning it, that it was more discipline, obviously the tiramisu and all of that drama. But now that he has a nutritionist and he's saying that it's not about the discipline, if he can't make the weight, then I think, like you're saying, it might just be that that's not his natural weight class. And that's something that he has to think about long term. But we'll see. I really, really, can you imagine if he can't make this fight and they cancel? I'm just.
And then you also have to factor, if he does pull out, does the UFC consider cutting him? Because this is not the first time this has happened. This will be, I think, the second or third time, especially on a really big stage. And you add in the injury problems. I mean, they could make a case that they're like, we just don't want to deal with you anymore. You know, we can't deal with this constant disappointment. And I'm not saying it will happen, but it's something that they could consider. Or they're going to pull like a Gastelum and Johnny Hendrick and just be like, if you fight for us again, it has to be at 100 pounds.
Yeah, and I think, you know, fans already were willing to kind of write him off, or at least a good majority of fans. He's still getting backlash from this last time. So I think, like you said, if something does happen where he can't make this fight, I can't imagine that they would put him on maybe even a main card, but definitely not a co-main or main event.
Let's see. We have another consecutive week asking what Conor McGregor is going to fight again. When he runs out of money, when he runs out of money, he'll fight again. So whenever that may be, it could be this year, it might be next year. I don't know. I mean, he seems to spend it pretty fast though, Kayla. So it could be sooner than we think.
I think it'll be back in 2018.
It depends how many gifts he bought his son. So you think about it. He didn't have to buy his son any gifts last Christmas. He didn't have a son last Christmas. So I think that's a big factor. You know, when you're buying your son, you know, some nice Don Giovanni suits and stuff, as one does with their newborn son, that, you know, that's a pretty penny. So
Aaron says, McGregor versus GSP or Floyd Mayweather, do you think it could happen?
The GSP is more likely. The GSP is more likely because GSP has said he wants a big fight next. So I don't think either is going to happen, but if I had to say which one is more likely of those two in the UFC's octagon, I would say GSP.
I agree. I would also say GSP, but I think, you know, GSP had that plan. Middleweight, welterweight, then the lightweight. He wants to try and be this, you know, winner of 3 titles. I think I see GSP and Tyron fighting before he drops down to 155, but who knows? We'll see.
And then he said, anyone else excited for Condit versus Magny? I'm excited for that fight. Obviously, we're going to break it down here in a few minutes, but yeah, I'm excited for that fight. I think that Carlos Condit, I don't think has ever had a boring fight in his history of being a professional, maybe in his early days, but as far as from WC on, I haven't seen one fight where like, man, that Carlos Condit fight sucked. I don't think anyone's ever said that before.
Right. No, I agree. He's always going to give us a good show.
All right, let's look at this undercard, which now, because of a couple of cancellations and move around, actually only has 5 fights, only 1 fight on the Fight Pass portion, and that's going to be Tim Elliott as he takes on Mark De La Rosa. Of course, Elliott was supposed to fight not too long ago, and his opponent pulled out. He got his show money, and now he has the fight here against De La Rosa. A friend of mine who I've interviewed on the show, and he trains right here in Metro Detroit, Jared Brooks, had a little bit of talking back and forth, as Jared likes to do, talking to Tim Elliott. I thought, oh, man, maybe Jared would jump in and get the short notice, but De La Rosa gets it here, and it ends up being at 135 pounds with the short notice nature. So, yeah, at least on the UFC website. The UFC website's been wrong before, but that's an interesting fight just because obviously Elliott got upset in his last fight by Ben Nguyen. A lot of people did not see that coming, so it'll be interesting how Elliott responds to that. And then another guy I'm always excited to watch, Luis Smolka returns.
Me
Takes
too.
on Nicolo on the FS1 prelims.
And this is an important fight for him because he's on three losses, even though his last fight, I think, was it fight of the night?
Yeah, and he's lost to solid competition. The aforementioned Tim Elliott is one of those losses. He lost to eventual actually, two losses, if you think about it, are guys that had fought for the championship, and Ray Borg and Tim Elliott. And then he lost to, he got caught in that submission by Brandon Moreno in October of last year. So it's been a little bit of a rough go for Smolka, but he is a guy that is definitely very talented. And I think, I mean, just by the nature of the UFC, if he loses, he probably gets cut. But I think even if he loses, I think by no means is he done in his career. I think he's too young to already be done. I just think he's kind of just had a bad run against some really good competition. And really, you look at the Ray Borg fight, let's not forget Ray Borg did miss weight by like 5 pounds or so in that fight.
That's right, yeah.
So that wasn't, you can also add that as a factor in as well for Mr. Smolka.
I think it would be a mistake if they let him go. I think, like you said, the opponents that he was fighting against and the fact that they went all 3 rounds, it's not like he was knocked out in all 3 of these losses. I think that'd be a mistake for them. But let's see how he performs, and let's hope for the best. I'm a fan of his as well.
And then speaking of Michigan, we got from Hazel Park, Michigan, Miles Jury taking on former World Series of Fighting champion Rick Glenn at 145 pounds. It's been a while since we've seen Miles. Obviously, he's a guy that really shot up the 155 rankings, especially after his win over Takanori Gomi. Then he got kind of soundly beat by Donald Cerrone, I believe, in the following fight, and kind of took some time off and fought almost a year later, made his debut at 145. It didn't go well. He got submitted in the first round by Miles Jury. He came back he took then almost like another layoff, an 18-month layoff, came back in April of this year and soundly knocked out Mike De La Torre, and this is now his next fight since. So with only fighting twice, this will be his second fight since December of 2015, you'd have to feel that Miles Jury is a fresh and rejuvenated individual, a guy that I think does have a lot of talent. I think he just kind of ran up. I mean, Donald Cerrone is a very good fighter. Yeah. There's no shame in losing to Donald, and even losing to Charles Oliveira. That guy is arguably the best submission guy in the UFC. So none of those losses are a shame, but But with the layoff, has he lost any little bit of a step at all? That's the only thing I could maybe see, because Rick Glenn is a guy, even in his fight against Evan Dunn, which he lost, he is a tough dude. This dude does not stop coming. And if Miles Jury's off just a little bit, somebody like Rick Glenn, a guy that's not really that talented athletically, but works really hard, kind of reminds me of John Fitch a little bit, he will find that mistake and he can get a win. So this is not the type of guy that you can bring, a subpar game and win. You have to be at your limit, because he will not stop working. And I think he's proven that in his career.
It looks like the idea of ring rust will be tested here.
And then for Rick Glenn, obviously, I'm trying to think when he last fought here. So he debuted in the UFC up a weight class on short notice against Evan Dunham. Lost, but still got a nice fight of the night, $50,000 bonus on her. So not too bad if you're going to lose. And then he's come back in his last 2 fights and beaten some really good guys. He beat Philippe Nover, and then he beat everyone's new darling at 145 was Gavin Tucker. Tucker. He kind of beat the crap out of him. I mean, he outstruck him 142-23. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people were like, oh, Gavin Tucker, he's the next big thing. And here comes Rick Glenn and just completely, at least as of right now, kind of derailed that hype train a little bit. So I would say momentum-wise, Rick Glenn is the one that has the momentum coming into this fight.
Yeah, it looks like it. And I think, like you said, it's just going to be a matter of seeing if that layoff helped Miles Jury or is going, like we said, the ring rust is going to show there. But it'll be interesting. And it looks like Rick Glenn is trying to take that number 15 spot. Even though Miles Jury has been out for a little bit, he's still currently ranked number 15, it says. So
yeah, and another interesting thing, because Rick Glenn has probably been the underdog in every single fight that he's been in. I think most people would agree, and I would say he's probably the underdog again here, not just rankings-wise, as you alluded to, Kayla, but prestige-wise. Miles Jury's been around for a long time. He's beaten some quality competitors inside the octagon. So, again, he's the underdog, but he seems to relish that role. I don't know if that's like the Midwest Iowa thing, hard-working thing that he has, but he just seems to be a very tough out for people. And I think that's one thing I'm going to look for. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to be rooting for Miles training about 15 miles from me. But I can't – Rick Glenn's just one of those guys I don't think you can't not like. I know that's double negative, but I think most fans – he fights the way fans want fighters to fight, and that's Rick Glenn.
Right, and the fact that if he's stopping, like you said, these hype trains, that's always a fun upset.
All right, we did get a question come in here from – let's see, we got a couple questions here. Ray asked, is this do or die for Carla? No, I don't think so. I don't think it is because, yeah, she lost to Randa, but yes, that was a close fight. She won the fight previously. I believe that was against Juliana Lima or Kendra Farah. I forget the opponent. I'll double check the names, but she had a win in between there.
Juliana Lima, yeah.
Yeah, so this would only be her second loss in a row, and Cynthia Calvalho, I believe, is ranked – well, she's top 10. I have to check the actual number, but I think she's number 5 or something. So losing to Calvalho is not a bad loss. So I don't think it's necessarily do or die. And I think regardless of how her career has played out since becoming the first strawweight champion, there's a lot of sentiment there. And so I think the UFC would really – she'd have to get 4, maybe even 5 losses in a row before the UFC card just because of that sentiment. And so, also, and the women's divisions aren't quite as deep as men's, so she could probably stick around a little longer than because of that. That's why I don't think it's a do or die fight. But as far as her getting back to championship potential, I think you can make a case. If she loses this, she's probably not getting back to the title. You could say that. So it's not the end of her career, but end of her maybe championship aspirations.
Yeah, I wouldn't say do or die either. I think if anything, what's been hurting her is her lack of activity. I think she just hasn't been fighting as often. So, like you said, she has that momentum of being the first champion in that division. But because we haven't seen her as often, unless you're someone who's deep in the MMA world or has been watching for a long time, not as many of these new viewers know of her or know of her history. So I think that's what's kind of hurting her more than anything. But I agree. I think if she does lose, it'll just kind of bump her back within the rankings. And I think hopefully that'll kind of, light some fire under her to just fight more often so she can get her name back into that top 5 talk.
Aaron, we're going to do picks at the end, so wait to the end, and we will most certainly pick Holly Holm versus Chris Cyborg. Obviously, that being the main event of 219. So we will get to that. So, let's get to what was the Khalil Roundtree's the last fight on the undercard portion, and I'm excited to see Khalil, a guy that's always exciting. His last fight, I believe that was with Tyson Pedro. No, he had the fight in Scotland where he knocked out the Bear Jew there in like 2 minutes or whatever, and all the fans went quiet. I know if Peter's still watching,
Paul Craig.
Yeah, that was talk about shutting the crowd down. I mean, he shut them down. They went really quiet after that, and so very impressive performance for Khalil. He's a guy that obviously is a very powerful striker. It's just a question of how long can he keep it standing. And that's really, again, no matter how good his opponent's grappling game is, they want to tie him up. So really that's the question for him. Will he be able to keep it standing long enough to unleash one of those powerful punches that he's capable of? Because when it does release, it's nasty. And I think if you haven't seen that fall against the Bear Jew, I think prove that this guy has some serious power.
Yeah, he's coming off those 2 first-round KOs. And, the loss, like you said, to Tyson Pedro was a first round submission. So let's hope that maybe that fight and that loss kind of woke him up to work more on his takedown defense and ground game. But let me look into a little bit. What do you know about his opponent, Michael?
Not much. So I'm not going to say that's the reason he should win, but
this is his debut.
I think it sets up that this is a fight. I hate picking guys in their UFC debut, especially a guy that's had now, I think, 5 fights in the UFC. Let's not forget he trains at Syndicate MMA, which is just down the street from T-Mobile Arena. He doesn't have to go anywhere. He's perfectly, safe and sound at home there in Las Vegas. I think that comfortability factor add something into someone coming in, and especially it's the highlight fight on FS1. This is the fight that when they show the commercials like FS1 prelims, Khalil Roundtree, that's the
Right.
fight. And so that for a new guy making his debut, especially somebody as dangerous as Khalil Roundtree, I could see how that could get to a guy. And so while, yeah, you can make the counter argument, the pressure's on Khalil, I don't think he's I hate to be mean, but I don't think he's a big enough name to really feel that much pressure. I don't think that many people are talking about Khalil Roundtree. It's a fight he should win, but that doesn't mean if he loses and we're back here next week, Kayla, we're like, well, I can't believe Khalil Roundtree lost. Like, man, what are they at? It's not going to be like a complete shocker. It's a fight he should win, but how much? Anytime you take on an unknown quantity, someone that hasn't fought in the UFC, how much tape is there of that guy? What was the quality opponents he's facing? You got to take a lot of those things into consideration. So it's kind of just, you got to go in there and kind of do your own thing because you don't really know what that guy is going to bring to the table. And that does make the matchup tricky.
Yeah, it's saying on here that he is on a 9-fight winning streak. We don't know with which promotion. 8 wins by KO and 1 by submission. So this might just be a stand-up banger, which is always exciting.
Which played right in Khalil's roundhouse. Yeah, and his Roundtree's roundhouse, right?
Yeah, so
wheelhouse.
And I think like you're saying that with an MMA debut, it's so hard to, like you said, even try to predict or bet on that. The guy could capitalize on it or he could choke because we don't know if that big stage is going to get to him. So. But it looks like they'll stand up and bang, so that's always exciting.
All right, let's get to the main card here of UFC 219. Once again, it's going to be on pay-per-view this Saturday, December 30th, from Las Vegas, Nevada, at the T-Mobile Arena. 5 fights are going to be shown on the main card for this event. Of course, highlighted by the title fight between Holly Holm and Chris Cyborg for the Women's Featherweight Championship. And one thing I want to bring up just real quickly, I don't know, this featherweight championship, isn't it so funny? We're talking about this now, and it's like Durandamy like never existed. I feel like she's going to be like the one champion that just kind of gets like blanked out from history. Like she may like never be like really talked about again. It's almost like it's funny because this is the fight they wanted in February of this year. In the Barclays Center. This was the fight. They didn't want Durandamy at all. But, of course, Cyborg had her issues, and then there was talk about not fighting in the UFC. So we had to wait, I guess, 10 months for it to happen, but we get it to happen. And I think this is a fight everybody wanted to see. We just got to see it 10 months after the fact.
Yeah, it's always hard to discuss that because I kind of see both sides. She wanted to, say no to an opponent and a lot of people said, that if you were going into this division that you were eventually going to fight Cyborg. So as a champion, how are you saying, no, I refuse to fight Cyborg? But then at the same time too, to actually strip her of her belt and not even throw any other opponents at her. I can see that whole argument of how come Conor McGregor and other champions are getting, favored over Durandamy, but it is a little sad because, like you said, it's almost like her whole championship and win is just going to be kind of forgotten and lost, which is a little sad.
We'll see. Maybe she'll come around and realize that athletes are tested for performance-enhancing drugs. So if and does Cyborg fails, then I guess she can now look good, but she hasn't failed a test in many years. So regardless whether she has taken something in the past, as of right now, nothing has been proven that she is still on any of those substances. But who knows? We'll find out this weekend if something happens. But I'm willing to give her another chance, that being Chris Cyborg. So, all right, let's get to the first fight of the evening. As our friend Ray commenting once again, thanks for the comments, Ray. Appreciate you watching. Neil Magny versus Carlos Condit. It's amazing. This is the first fight of the evening. Super excited for this. 8 versus 12 in the welterweight division. Carlos Condit has not fought since losing to Damian Maia. That was in August of last year. So it's been a while since we've seen the natural born killer. Of course, a guy that before that had that just a year ago on New Year's Eve 2016. No, it had been 2015. So almost 2 years ago, had the war with Robbie Lawler, one of the best fights you will ever see for a championship. He obviously fell short in that time. So we should see a rejuvenated Carlos Condit. This has been by far the longest layoff of his career. I think that'd be like something like 16 months or something like that since that fight in August. And he is a guy that is super well-rounded. He's a guy that puts up that strike count, can throw strikes from a variety of different angles. He also has, believe it or not, the majority of his a lot of submission wins too. And I think of his 30 victories, I think he has like 27 finishes or something ridiculous like that. So this is a guy that when he has the opportunity, puts people away. His opponent, Neil Magny, a little different guy. He's a big guy. He's a strong guy. He can impose his will. I think a lot of people, despite his last fight, I think he proved in the Hector Lombard fight that he can take a hit. I think there was a little bit of knock on that despite being big that he can't take a hit. But I think he's a guy that can take a hit. I think just when people get him on early, that's when he seems to falter. Same thing like Hector Lombard. Even though he had to come back and win, he obviously had that horrible first round. RDA went right through him. Lorenz Larkin landed those like weird ankle kicks and went. So the first round is going to be a huge key for Neil Magny because not only has it seemed to be kind of his Achilles heel, you're also taking on a guy that hasn't fought in 16 months, regardless of what level he was at before. You got to imagine Carlos Condit might want to try to ease into this thing. And so that may allow an opportunity for Neil Magny to kind of, I think, have a better chance of winning as opposed to someone like a Mike Perry or something that's going to just run at him and try to, knock his head off. So I think for both guys, that first round is really going to be key for how this fight will play out in the second and third.
Yeah, I agree. I think that with Carlos Condit's experience, he goes into these fights and, he doesn't rush for that finish. He really, will let it play out. And when he sees that opportunity, he capitalizes on it. And I think his, composure and experience within just his, record of fighting has really helped him. And I think that that's going to play into, like you said, Neil Magny, for some reason, I feel like in his last couple of fights, I don't know. He seems like he does get a little frustrated in the first round and might need a little time to kind of warm up in there. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If it's going to play out in his favor or in Carlos's favor, who can go those 3 rounds and break someone down. So, and then I think too, a lot of people look at Neil Magny and don't wonder why he doesn't use his height and his length, his reach and his, what is the word that people use for lanky arms? No.
Yeah.
Like his langliness? I don't know. But you know what I'm trying to say. He's one of the taller, bigger guys, like you said. And I think a lot of people have said, why doesn't he use that to his opportunity? But he's also a wrestler. So it's going to be interesting just to see where this fight goes. It's kind of hard to predict for me, but I think that I'm going to say, I think, like you said, even though Condit's been, away for a little bit from the interviews that I've seen or watched over this week, it seems like though he was kind of on the fence and throwing that retirement word out over, with his last 2 losses, it seems like he's kind of taken that time to step away. I think he's still been training this whole time, but step away and really realize that he does want to continue fighting. So I'm going to say that I think Carlos Condit's experience and just keen eye for seeing those opportunities and finishes is going to get him the win. But I think it's going to happen in the third. Okay. What are you predicting?
You're predicting early? You don't want to wait until the end of the show?
Oh, that's right. I forgot that we predict at the end. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. We'll let that one slide. We'll get to that. No, but what I was going to say is this has actually surprised me. Even though Neil Magny is 5 inches, okay. The only big difference is the reach. These two are actually just about the same height. Neil Magny is only an inch taller than Carlos Condit, so it's not as big of a height advantage as people think, but the reach is going to be different. 80-inch reach for Magny as opposed to just 75 for Condit. And then they even started measuring the leg reach. I think Joe Rogan kept on saying in the broadcast enough that they did that. That's just about identical as well. So that's the only thing, really big difference between these two is the arm length. I think the first round, I think Neil Magny will try to strike with Carlos Condit. I think he's really going to test that reach, test where Condit's, striking's at, where see how many strikes he puts up there. Normally a guy that is a volume striker coming off the laugh, I think he's going to test that. And if it doesn't start to go his way, I think he will revert to trying to out-grapple and get Condit on his back. And if he can't get Condit on his back, he's going to be in a very difficult situation because Carlos Condit is not afraid to strike with anybody. And if you're in a situation where if that's your plan B, so to speak, is to take him down, and that plan B doesn't work, do you even have a plan C? And what even is plan C? I don't know what plan
Right.
C is. And so that all of a sudden puts you in a weird mental state. And that's where somebody like a Carlos Condit, he puts you away. So I think that's where I'm going to look for is when and if Neil Magny shoots in. I think it's more when more so than if. And if he can be successful, that's where the if comes in. If he can be successful implementing that game plan. All right, we already talked about whether it's a do-or-die fight. We don't think it is, but it is a fantastic matchup in the women's strawweight division between Carla Esparza and Cynthia Calvillo. I think striking-wise, I think Cynthia is the better striker. I don't think Carla really – I think she's competent, but I don't think she's really improved that much from her time on The Ultimate Fighter a few years ago to now. I would say it's better, but I'm not saying it's like leaps and bounds better. So standing up, I have to go with Calvillo. On the ground, yeah, Carla is probably the better wrestler, but so far in the UFC, Calvillo has shown to be the better submission artist and has submitted several people already in the UFC. And I think and even though she didn't get a submission, I thought she put Joanne Calderwood in some very difficult positions earlier this year with her grappling. And so I think that's going to be the key. I think Carla is going to attack Cynthia on the ground. That's just what she does. And it's just a matter of how well Cynthia does off her back, or if she can she swept Joanne a couple of times. So if she can use some of those jiu-jitsu sweeps to get on top where I don't think Carla has a great game off her back, all of a sudden Cynthia is in a very advantageous position. So I think this is going to be a very high-level grappling match between a very good wrestler and I think a very good just overall submission artist. And I think that's where we're going to see. If it does stay standing, well, I would say Calvillo is the better kickboxer of the two.
Yeah, that's what gets me so excited is I see this fight going to the ground as well. And I think that, again, this is where Carla Esparza's, non-activity is going to hurt her. I don't think she's realizing that these young, hungry girls and sleepers like Cynthia, who's been training with Team Alpha Male for years, trying to get past an injury and broke into 2017 just with a bang and taking out, a lot of high-level people in her division. But I think that this is where she's going to see that there's kind of these evolved mixed martial artists where Cynthia is someone, like you said, who has the stronger stand-up, but I think has all of those transitions, sweeps, just tricky stuff on the ground that unless Carla's kind of recognized that stuff's going on and that she needs to focus and train on that, she's not going to be able to, I don't think, defeat Cynthia just with her wrestling alone. So, but I'm excited. I love when the fights go to the ground. I love seeing those transition sweeps and how they kind of break each other down, on the mat. So I'm hoping it goes to the ground because I feel like we'll see some cool stuff.
Absolutely. We got a couple questions from Aaron. He mentioned, when do you think Ronda Rousey will fight again if in the UFC? I don't think she's fighting in the UFC again, so I'll answer that for you. And then I haven't heard any updates on Nate Diaz. Of course, there was for a while there him possibly moving up to fight Tyron. It doesn't seem like that ever materialized. And it seems as though he now wants a ridiculous amount of money. I like Nate Diaz. I know you can't see it because of the split screen, but I got the little Diaz, brother figures and stuff. So I am a fan of the guy. But him and his brother like fighting, but they're not like super motivated to do it. I don't know. They're like I don't know what it is. I think they've gotten to a point in their career where like, oh, I only do it for this. It's like, but yet, you see videos of them like fighting dudes like in a backyard or, bare knuckle and stuff. So I don't know. They're tough dudes, but I think they got to a point where they're like, they're good. People like them, but I think they maybe overvalue how much they're actually worth compared to what the market is allowing. And I think that's something that is unfortunate because I think we've kind of got robbed from seeing especially Nick, probably more so than Nate, really compete at the high level over the last couple of years because I think they've let a little bit of ego kind of get in the way of actually fighting. And I think it's kind of unfortunate. I think they're really cool to just chill and do seminars and as they like to do, smoke marijuana. I think they're completely fine with doing that.
And they're doing their triathlons and
Well,
other
yeah, of
sport
course, those two.
activities. But yeah, I think that they liked the fight game back in the day, but I think the more that, it's evolved and the more that they're having to be these businessmen and that side of it, they aren't really enjoying that part. But I think if we see Nate back, it's going to be for the trilogy. And I think it's kind of going to be a bummer just because of his inactivity, unless he has been training a bunch that we don't know about. I think that that is going to be unfortunate that the trilogy was pushed so far back
Right.
that it won't be as exciting as the first two. But who knows? Maybe it will.
The next fight, this is one of the fights that got moved up because of the Lineker and Jimmy Rivera fight getting canceled off this card. So it's going to be at 155 pounds as New Zealand's own Dan Hooker takes on the bone crusher, Mark Diakiese. And very excited for this. Obviously, Diakiese's coming off a loss to my hometown guy here in Jakar Close. In that fight, while there was some striking, I think Close showed that while, yes, Mark is still a very dangerous individual standing, he doesn't quite have the grappling down. And I wouldn't even say Close is he's a good grappler, but wouldn't say he's a great grappler. And I think he was able to tie him up and kind of wear down Mark, especially as that fight went on. And I think the fact that those two were John, I think there was kind of some emotional adrenaline dump too in that fight. So I think Jakar got under the skin. Dan Hooker is not that type of guy. No offense to the man from New Zealand, but I haven't heard the trash talk between these two, so I don't see that type of kind of emotional investment this time around from Mark. However,
well, it did come out. It did come out. There's two things going around that supposedly in here they're saying that there's a rat in Hooker's camp and that there's also a rat in Holmes' camp. So Cyborg and Mark are both saying, oh, I have some intel from you guys, and they're trying to get in their head that way. So it does seem like Mark's trying to put that emotional,
he's trying to cerebral.
Yeah, but I don't think Dan Hooker is falling for it. But I know that I read something this morning.
Because doesn't Dan Hooker train in New Zealand too?
I don't.
I thought he does.
I'm sure
I thought he still does a lot of training at home. So I'm not saying it's not impossible. I'm saying, what are the odds that someone from New Zealand is now leaking information to someone training in England? I mean, I know internet and stuff moves fast, but like, how do you make that? I don't know.
I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that in there because I thought
really what this fight will come down to is, can Hooker create the scrambles to get this thing onto the ground? Because jiu-jitsu-wise, you have to say Dan Hooker is the better fighter. But the longer it stays standing, kind of similar to when Dan Hooker fought, I believe he fought Sage Northcutt, he will have some problems with these crazy karate strikers. And I think the fact he's already taken on one, I think kind of plays into the Bone Crusher's hands very well. So Hooker's going to really have to look for those scrambles, look for maybe catching a kick, countering on an overhand, swinging around, take the back. I think those are the areas, those 50-50 positions where whoever turns the corner first wins. Those are the type of situations Dan Hooker has to win. If he's not able to win those situations, we may see another spinning back kick knockout added to the Bone Crusher's highlight reel.
No, I agree. I think that, like you said, it's all a matter of if he can get him to the ground and stop that flashiness, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's got those situations where it's all about hustle. Dan Hooker has to win those, because if he doesn't, I think he's going to lose, because I think Mark is the more talented individual. All right. He hasn't pulled out yet, as Peter has alluded to, but it could still happen. We're going to break it down anyway. Edson Barboza taking on Habib Nurmagomedov. This is a matchup of 2-foot top 5 lightweight individuals. The winner very likely could be facing Tony Ferguson for the interim title very shortly. Much like a lot of fights we've said, striker versus grappler, and this one probably even more so, because Habib has shown that he is a very strong grappler. Coming from that Sambo background, he's a guy that when he takes you, he's a guy that doesn't look that big, a guy that doesn't look that strong, much like another Sambo champion coming out of Russia by the name of Fedor Emelianenko. But he just has great grip strength, and he knows how to hold a position when he gets it. And if this thing goes to the ground, the advantage is to the man from Dagestan, Russia. However, striking, I think Edson Barboza, the way he came in as a very electrifying striker, But I think he has, with the tutelage of Mark Henry and Frankie Edgar and Eddie Alvarez and Marlon Moraes, those guys out there in New Jersey, I think he has taken his striking to another level. And I think that showed in his fight with Anthony Pettis, where he completely outclassed the former world champion. This is a guy that not just has great kicks, he has great boxing. I think he has great conditioning. He hits very hard. I already say he throws very fast, and he can put up strikes too. The knock on him before he got to Mark Henry's was the footwork thing. However, he's fighting a guy that I don't think that could take advantage of that, and I think he's kind of called that too with the Mark Henry thing. So the longer this stays standing, Edson Barboza could absolutely dismantle Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I'm not saying that as an understatement. However, the longer it stays up against the cage and the clinch, Khabib, using that weight and strength against Edson, that's when he can dismantle Edson Barboza. It's who's going to be able to impose their will the best, and whoever can do that will walk away with the win.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just a fight between two different styles. Who's going to get the fight to their natural habitat of striking or on the ground. But I think that, like you said, Barboza, I'm sure, has been working more on his footwork. I don't think, like you said, that that's a huge factor that's going to play into this fight. But he has some of the fastest and strongest kicks. It will be interesting to see if he's able to just completely take down and knock down Khabib's tree, or if Khabib's going to get him to the ground and, like he does with many of his opponents, just overpower them with that bare strength, with that strong grappling and wrestling.
Now, the one good thing, I think it's a lot harder to prepare for Edson Barboza in his striking style than conversely prepare for Khabib. And that's not saying Khabib's not talented. I'm just saying there's a lot of good jiu-jitsu guys that are out there in New Jersey, with Ricardo Almeida being associated with Frankie Edgar and Renzo Gracie and stuff like that. So there are guys that he's probably been grappling with. And so I say if anybody can kind of like get out of those situations better, I would say Edson might be more prepared for that. And also, we joke about him pulling out. You have to say conditioning is a factor, because of how much weight he's cutting and how he has to bloom back up. Edson Barboza, though a very put-together individual as well, so far hasn't really shown any problems of making 155, has never really been a guy that we've seen fade. So conditioning-wise, you have to favor Edson Barboza. And so if Khabib can't put him away with a submission or, knockout, due to ground and pound, I think by the second round, that third round, you have to say Edson has an advantage in that category.
No, that's true. That's something that I think not enough people are talking about, is that conditioning and the trouble that goes along with, making weight, because unfortunately we haven't seen Khabib get to that point yet of actually stepping in there and seeing if his conditioning is still on point. But hopefully we will on Saturday.
Let's get to the main event. Women's Featherweight Championship, as Chris Cyborg puts her UFC title on the line for the first time, taking on Holly Holm. And one quick thing here before we get to that. We have Brad just commented, Barboza has an 86% takedown defense. I just said Edson has a good chance of winning. I completely agree. I didn't know the 86% though. But that's the thing. You don't have to take Edson down for Khabib to get like a winning strategy. Tying up against the fence, making him carrying against the waist, throwing little short elbows and shots. Doing that, pushing the pace. We've seen people win fights in the UFC just doing that. So that's the thing. He doesn't even have to take him down. He just has to tie him up. That's the one pro of grappling, because you're pushing your offense on the other guy. So, and as per Fight Mac, I'm assuming that's probably where he. But yeah, that's the thing. He doesn't have to be that successful at taking him down to stop him. That's the thing. It's just he can land more damage and effective damage if he gets on top of him. But thanks for the comment, Brad. I appreciate that. Now let's get to this main event, Kayla. Cyborg versus Holm, like I said, entering 10 months in the waiting for this fight. We finally get to see it here on New Year's Eve. And the biggest thing I have to say about this fight is, if this happened, I think maybe 3-4 years ago, I probably would have picked Holly Holm without question, because I think Cyborg was still a very reckless fighter, one that just went over, used her just raw power and strength to just put girls away. Now, I think she's kind of matured a little bit. I think that Tanya Evinger fight was just a masterful performance. She's waiting for her shots. She's being patient. She's mixing up grappling very well with the striking. And the fact that she is so strong and powerful, she doesn't really have to worry about, even if she gets hit, she can take them. And she doesn't really have to get worried about taking down because she's so strong, she can shrug off most takedown attempts. And as we know, really from the Miesha Tate fight, Holly Holm's not that much of a grappler. And so I don't think there's going to be a very big threat at the takedown here. And when it comes to the ground, you would have to say the jiu-jitsu-wise and obviously ground and pound lies with the Brazilian in Cyborg. The difference is going to be how the footwork, that game plan she comes up with Greg Jackson, that movement, that cerebral attack, that's how that head kick came, the countering, how that is going to work on Cyborg. That's going to be the factor. How is that movement? How's Cyborg going to deal with that, the countering? And, will that wear her out in a 25-minute fight? Obviously, with Holm being a woman who's fought majority of her career at 135. She has no problem making 145, so you would think conditioning-wise, she is the better shape to go the 25 minutes. So how is that going to hold up over 25 minutes? Will that frustrate Cyborg at all? Will that cause her to do something reckless like she has done in the past? And that's where someone like Holm can plant a head kick like she did to Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, I think it's going to go down to, because like you said, I think just both fighters have actually matured. But I really agree with you with Cyborg especially. But I think after Holly losing the title, going on that short run of a couple of losses, I think that she's matured too and looked into the loopholes in her game. And I think it really just comes down to who's prepared for each other maybe longer, or in which ways have they prepared for each other. I think that, yes, Holly has that speed and footwork that everyone feels like will be able to, last with Cyborg and find those opportunities for strikes to kind of rock her like no one has before. But I think that Cyborg has also come out saying that this was a fight that, like you said, 10 months ago, people were wanting and talking about. So she's always had that in the back of her head to kind of slowly start training to fight Holly. So it's going to be interesting because I think we're going to see both ladies kind of, have advanced and evolved within their mixed martial arts. And who knows if it's going to be Holly's takedown defense or her stuff that she's worked out on the ground, or if it's going to be Cyborg, her training and her sparring and Muay Thai and kickboxing that she's been working on. So that's what makes this fight so exciting. And then what's exciting too is Holly has the opportunity to be the first woman to win 2 titles, or titles in 2 different divisions. Cyborg knows that this would be a huge win for her. Holly knows that would be another huge win for her after the Ronda Rousey knockout. So there's a lot on the line for these ladies to really cement themselves in history. And I think that that's why they're both just going to go out and bring it. And it's such an exciting main event.
Absolutely. I'm really excited that we finally get to see this fight because I don't know how you feel, Kayla, and you can comment here. I feel like as of right now, Cyborg's in her prime. She hasn't left it yet. But I feel as far as someone beating her in her prime, I feel like Holly Holm has the best chance to do that. I'm not sure if there's another woman right now in any organization that could fight at 145 pounds that I would pick against Cyborg right now. And I think Holm may be the only one where if people were actually going to bet and put money, I would go, that's not a bad bet. I think if anyone can do it, it would be Holly Holm because she has the style that seems the perfect counter to Cyborg.
I agree.
All right. With that said, let's get to picks here. UFC 219 main card. And also, thanks for the comment, Brad. I agree a lot with pretty much all your points there. Carlos Condit versus Neil Magny at 170 pounds, number 8 versus number 12. Despite the layoff, Kayla, I'm going with Carlos Condit. I very, very rarely pick against the natural born killer. He's one of my all-time favorites. And I think the layoff, other people it would affect, but I think for a guy that's fought 40 times professionally and has fought at a level that he has fought at for many years, I think he's going to be just as ready as he's ever been. And I think Neil Magny has seemed to falter against some of the elites in the division. And this is another guy we consider one of the elites. So I'm going to go with the natural born killer in this one.
I also am going with Carlos Condit because of experience and things that you just mentioned there.
Carla Esparza against Cynthia Calvillo. I think Esparza definitely has a chance to win this fight, but the fighter right now with momentum on her side is Cynthia Calvillo. And I think simply she's the better stand-up fighter. And when it comes to grappling, I think she can hang with the wrestling pressure. I think she'll be able to deal with that. So if she does get taken down. So I'm going to go with Cynthia Calvillo in this one.
I'm also going with Cynthia. I think she has more tools and tricks under her sleeve, and I think that she's just training with the camp right now that is so aware of what you need to be training and working on to pump out championship-worthy fighters. So I'm also going with Cynthia.
Dan Hooker against Mark Diakiese. I'm going with the Bone Crusher Diakiese in this one. I just think he's the more talented individual, and I think he's going to be able to not allow those scramble situations for Hooker to get an advantage. And I think actually we're going to see another highlight reel knockout. I think that's what we're going to see here on Saturday night.
I'm also going with Diakiese, and I think that we're going to even see a little bit of taunting and that kind of not showboating, but a little bit of taunting in the octagon to get under Dan Hooker's skin and keep him standing and wanting to show off those flashy things, and like you said, possibly get another highlight finish.
Edson Barbosa against Habib Nurmagomedov. I even had trouble saying his first name. The Eagle. I think that's maybe I was trying to say the Eagle.
Can I hear your best Eagle impression?
I don't got. I have one. I have one. I have a horrible Russian accent. It sounds more like a Count Chocula sort of deal, so I'm not going to even entertain our fans with that. I think I probably should pick Habib, but I don't really like Habib. No offense to him as a person, but I'm going to go with Edson Barboza. I've always been a fan of this guy, and I hate to say it's his coming out party because I think he had that against Anthony Pettis, but I think this is going to show a lot of people that he's ready to take the lead. Maybe I'll be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I feel that this is going to be his showcase that he can deal with grapplers. And so I'm going to go with Edson Barboza to win this one.
Yeah, this one's so hard to pick for me for some reason. I just feel like Habib needs this win because he has so much that he needs to almost prove with the mistakes he's made with weight cutting and the things that he's already spoken about, saying that he's getting this title shot next or interim title. So he really needs the win, but something's telling me that Barboza is just going to go in there with a better game plan and be able to, whether it's chop him down with those kicks or just be the faster, more technical fighter. I'm favoring Barboza. That's what my gut says.
Main event of the evening, Chris Cyborg against Holly Holm for the Women's Featherweight Championship of the World. I'm going Chris Cyborg. I think that even if she gets outstrike, even if Holm seems to counter very well, I think people are forgetting that Cyborg is a very good grappler, and I think we'll be able to even take this thing up against the cage and take her down. And I think we saw in the Miesha Tate fight, Holm has some deficiencies in her grappling game. And I don't know how much that's improved since. And you also have to factor in Cyborg's bigger and stronger than Miesha Tate. So you factor all that in. I think this is Cyborg, and I think this is going to prove her as, if she wasn't already, as the pound-for-pound queen of women's mixed martial arts.
So we're 5 for 5. Ray's 4 for 5 with us. I'm also going with Cyborg. I do think that Holly's going to have some moments, though, in this fight, and I think she's going to show that Chris Cyborg can, be rocked a little bit. But I think that Chris has just kind of had more preparation and, like you said, is in her prime. And not that I am taking away from Holly's preparation or training or fight IQ. I just think that it's Chris Cyborg's time to reign as champion. So I think that she's going to edge out that win. But it's going to be a good fight, I'm predicting.
Absolutely. I'm very excited for it. Like I said, I think Holly has a chance. I really do. But it's hard for me to pick against Chris Cyborg. And I think most people would agree. It's one of those things where she's proven it so many times. It's hard to pick against her. So that's another reason I factor into. I know that's not like a great technical breakdown, but it's just, as you know, Kayla, I like picking people that are on a roll. and she's on one of the biggest roles you can be on. So that's
yeah.
Say so. Anything you else like to add in before we end the program this week, Kayla?
I'm watching more Risen, and I know that there's been some drama that's gone on. I feel like if anyone wants to be entertained, I woke up to a lot going on with the weigh-ins, drama there. I don't know if you want to touch into it or if you want to look into it yourself, but I think there's some weight and age issues going on with Gabby Garcia's fight. There was.
Don't even get me started on that. She's taking like a
year-old
like
Ian
pro
McCall,
wrestler or something.
Yeah, and then there's some drama with Ian McCall's, face off with his opponent, but
and then the cup of guy in the background.
Yeah, I thought that was. So I don't know about everybody else, but I haven't watched as many Risen fights, and just that drama alone in the headlines have gotten me a little interested. So maybe we can discuss that next week.
Yeah.
After that fight.
We could do that.
Takes place.
We'll get some clips and stuff, but it should be pretty good. I think it's the opening round of their 135 Grand Prix. So that does have some pretty good talented individuals. I already mentioned Ian McCall. It also has Anthony Burchak, as well as Kaiji Horiguchi are going to be competing in it as well, as far as notable fighters. So pretty good assessment of talent that has come through it. So she is Kayla Beatty. You can follow her on Twitter at fangirl_MMA. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Thank you, everybody, for watching another edition of Beyond the Cage here on MMA World, and we will see you next week. So goodbye, everybody.